is called Two Must-Haves to Sell Your Web Series and Online Content. And what I mean by online content is anytime you take a camera out and point it at yourself or somebody else, try to communicate a big idea and bring an audience into your world and actually try to pay the rent doing it. I put these two things on par or even ahead of talent. One of the things is the internet is filled with amazing stuff that nobody sees. So how do you get people there? Well, I'll tell you what. There's two things. One is pre-build an audience. And you hear me all the time say, audience, audience, audience. Have that audience before you start making big, expensive stuff. Most of my clients have had the same experience. They raise money through crowdfunding and friends and families. They shoot a fairly expensive piece of work and launch it into the ether of YouTube, fingers crossed, hoping for that audience to appear. And lo and behold, it rarely does. That tactic of sort of working on something that you built, launching it and hoping is a tough one to sustain, and it rarely has success. Sorry to say, but it's true. And remember, though, it's not your fault. This has been an idea that's been drilled into series creators' heads from a whole host of sources. The industry loves to point at the one or two examples of people getting that lightning in a bottle success, that overnight success, we say, and they show it as being a common occurrence when in fact it just simply isn't. It's very rare. Rather, I'll show you how top producers and creators generate, that organic buzz that draws people into their world. I'll walk you through the how-tos of how to build an audience. At least a couple of tactics that have worked for me and my company, as well as work for top creators. As well as the next one is business model. Business model is the bucket that gets created so the business knows where to spend its money, right? If you don't have a business model, if you don't know what it is you make, how it gets made, what audience it's serving, and why it's important to the industry, they'll never be able to write a big check to you. So let's move on. Let's get right into it. Audience building. You guys are always asking me, Alex, you're always talking about pre-building an audience. Well, how do you do it? Well, I'm going to give you one tactic that works for me and works for top creators that is pretty foolproof. But before that, I want you guys to understand that there's some elements to audience building, and these are some pillars that you need to have to build that audience and bring people into your world. First is know your genre and your niche. It may sound obvious, but what is it you make? A lot of us make hybrid content. Be able to identify that. Maybe we occupy some little corner of sci-fi or some weird little off branch of horror. Know exactly what that is and give it a name, because then that way people will know exactly where to go. Who are the fans of that, right? Who are the people who love that? And that's simple. Is it 11-year-old to 18-year-old boys? Is it 35-year-old women? Where do they fit? Who is it that has their eyeballs on the content that is working in that genre? One of the big ones is, where are they hanging out? What are they saying about this? One of the best things to do is go through comment sections. It can be on Facebook, it can be on Reddit, it can be on Amazon, it can be anywhere. Look for people who are talking about this, and what is it that they're kind of buzzing about? What is a common theme that continually shows up? And if you can find that, you're going to be able to create content that serves their need, that serves that idea, right? And finally, go where they are and be their authority. So once you find out where they are, you need to be an expert in that genre. You need to be able to talk very specifically and in an authoritative fashion. Believe it or not, people are looking for authority all the time. They're looking for something to sort of give voice to what they think about the content that they watch. They want an opinion, they want an idea. And in order to do that, you got to take a stand and you have to have an opinion about it, which means that you have to be very knowledgeable about it. So, that being said, I am going to show you my 3-step Facebook strategy, right, for building an audience. This is something that has served me and is something that is really, very gains a lot of traction and brings people into my world. Now, I'm not trying to build a giant Instagram, following, or a big Facebook following, or a big YouTube following. I am bringing people into my world, and I'll explain that in a second. So, first step. Write relevant content on Facebook groups. Find those Facebook groups that are always talking about your genre. There are so many sort of film-centric groups that are really niche-oriented. There are sci-fi ones, there are horror ones, there are romantic comedy ones, there are all of that, right? So find out those and find, 10 of them, right? And then write relevant content. Again, have that opinion. Have the opinion of, what you think about the genre. Give them some information that they may not have known about it. Talk about, not just what you're making, but what are other people making, right? A lot of people will just go, hey, check out my new trailer. Well, how many times a day do you see check out my new trailer? And how many times do you pass by that? But if somebody writes something like, the 2 biggest things I found out about funding after selling my short film were this. Well, I'm going to click on that because I got to know that, right? And now all of a sudden, I know who you are. I know what you do. I know what you make. And you've given me something of value. So this is really important. Next, right? Invite people who comment on your personal Facebook, on your Facebook group posts to your personal Facebook page, and make sure your personal Facebook page is set up so that they understand that you make movies, or you make web series, or you're a vlogger, and that you have something to say, right? Anybody who is willing to comment on your stuff is somebody who is engaged with you, somebody who is in your world, right? Who values what you're doing. Last, once you get them into your personal Facebook page, directly ask them to join your mailing list. Having a mailing list, I can't explain to you, is more important than having a big Facebook following. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, those are all supplements to you as a filmmaker. They are all the places that can feed people into your world, but having email addresses being in somebody's inbox is the most intimate relationship you can have. And then you own that audience, right? Facebook owns your audience on Facebook. Instagram owns your audience on Instagram, and YouTube owns your audience on YouTube. If they change something, we've seen them change little user things in the user agreements, and all of a sudden the algorithm changes and you watch people fleeing. Right? This is a tough place to be. So getting that mailing list built is really a great way. And I'll tell you, I can directly communicate to people in my mailing list because they're there. They had to physically type their name and email address into a field, which meant that they opted into me. Now, people constantly come after me for driving people into my mailing list and think that I'm, in some kind of way, I'm running a lark or some kind of sham. And it's bullshit. And I'll tell you why. Because if we just expect to throw up our trailers and millions of people are gonna show up, it's a fantasy. If we are communicating and adding value, that's the one thing I need you to understand, is that I always try to give my audience something to walk away with, something they can use today, something that worked for me and something that is a proven sort of tactic that has worked for other filmmakers and gotten a lot of success. Successful filmmakers outreach all the time. They're constantly talking to their audience. So, Next, business model. Business model is such an important thing, and so few people concentrate on it. They're so concentrated on making something that they don't know where it fits in the business, because at the end of the day, this is called show business, not show friends. And it's really important that you build that. So, these are some key components that hold up a business model and that sort of define a business model. First is, can you find on-screen talent? You need on-screen talent. You and your buddies shooting in the backyard. I get it. It's awesome. It's fun, and it's a super good way to learn. But those things rarely take off. So when you see that big YouTuber with his buds, they worked their ass off to get there, and they continually communicated with their audience, and they became on-screen talent, right? So that on-screen talent is valuable because people know who they are, and they're going to be able to gather around them. I will explain how to get on-screen talent in another video, but at the end of the day, it isn't as hard as you think. I personally have got fairly big actors to come and do small things because they either liked the script, or they liked me as a director, or they liked my producer, or whatever, or we just explained it well, right? So getting it isn't as hard as you think, and I will explain that in another video. So the next one is, it can be purchased by one of at least 3 distributors, right? You want to have as many shots, as many bites at the apple as possible. If you make something that only works at Food Network, or only works at ane.com, and you go and you pitch it to them and they say no, well, where do you go from there? So be sure that everything you do, you can have multiple meetings around. You can pitch several times. I say 3 here, but I usually like to have 5 or 6. So moving on. A flexible format. What do I mean by that? It means that I can cut it into 10-minute web series. I can cut it into half-hour TV. I can cut it into a 90-minute feature. It has to be malleable like that. So you have to have shot enough and created it in pre-production and in the writing portion of your development process. You need to have considered that already. So be sure that you can make this into a bunch of other things, including feature film, half-hour TV, or 10-minute episodes of a web series. Next, targeted audience. We've talked about this. Know who this goes to. Is it 18 to 24-year-old women? Is it 25 to 45-year-old dudes? Right? So they're going to ask that question, but they're also going to know their audience. So know what audience your distributor speaks to, and if your audiences match up, you stand a much bigger chance of success. And finally, that is it for today. But, I want you guys to always think that what we do is joyful. What we do is awesome. We constantly get to make stuff up and bring it to life into the world. And remember, you run your career. If you don't run your career, somebody else is going to define you for you. And that is the worst place to be, because you don't sit in the driver's seat, right? Next, make bold decisions. Take a stand. Be willing to get popped in the mouth for having an opinion. Don't try to please everybody, right? Next, defend your ideas. Again, we see it all the time online. Some dude comments about, like, who are you to comment about this? You got, 102 Facebook followers, right? Well, those are naysayers, and those are people who will be still getting you your coffee while you're on your way to the studio. And next, always be creating, always be making stuff, right? Be putting out your stuff into the world and constantly be communicating and growing your audience, because you know what? Those are the people that are going to come along with you for the long haul. So have a great day, and I can't wait to have you in this next training. And if you like this, subscribe to my channel and please leave a comment.